Hi everyone, this is a quick video to show you my T-Rex head sculpt, from sculpting it to adding detail to the techniques I use to cut it up and then 3D print it into a 3/4 scale 3D printed T-Rex head. So first off, I had this one that I'd sculpted for that Jurassic Park breakout scene that I did a YouTube video for, which some of you may have seen, and I had added a reasonable amount of detail to its head for what it was, the whole T-Rex. But then I decided I wanted to print it out at 3/4 scale or thereabouts, so I decided to, looking at it, it probably didn't have enough detail for a large scale print. So what I did then is I cut the head off through about here and saved the head as a separate file, which I'll load up. And then, using much the same techniques as I used on the Raptor head I basically then just spent a couple of extra hours just going through and carving out all the tiles and the scales on it, in basically the same sort of way I did it. And it just obviously makes the file size quite big, so which is why I got rid of the rest of the body. I didn't want to do detailing on anything I wasn't going to print. So there it is there. I didn't colour it till later on because I don't really need colour, because the printer just prints in whatever colour plastic you put in. So I have painted it now, kind of similar to what I did once it was printed. So yeah, so once I'd got it to this point, I thought, right, that's good to go. So then I saved it and exported it as an OBJ, and it took a reasonable amount of time because obviously this is a fairly big file now with the amount of detail and that in it. Like, I probably went a little bit overboard on the back down here, but yeah. And then once I had it exported, I then loaded it into Windows 10 3D Builder, and using that I proceeded to cut it with Plane Cut tool into 53 pieces that were sized to fit on the printer, because I've got my printer's an Ender 3 Pro and it has a 220mm by 220mm and 250 high printing bed or printing area, so I had to make sure each piece would fit on there. That was probably the most time consuming piece, was to cut and check each size and then go through to the Cura program, Cura Ultimaker, where I sliced it each piece and situated it for printing. And then I managed to print every single piece with no supports at all, just by the way I positioned them and the way that I cut each piece, and minimum infills where I could get away with very little. And yeah, then I proceeded to start printing, and I was extremely lucky that not one single print had a misprint or packed up sort of halfway through or had some sort of issue. So it printed extremely well, and after about 700 odd hours of printing, yeah, we got to the end and I was gluing and stitching it together as I went. So we'll move on to the next part of the video. So this is a little bit of a demonstration of how I was joining pieces of the T-Rex together. So I've got my soldering iron here, as you can see, and I've bent the end over in a vise and squished it a little bit, and which means I've still got a pointed end, but I can also use the rounded part for smoothing in the join. So what I would do for each piece is I would tack it together with the soldering iron just along the seams, and if there was, I'll just we'll cut a bit of a bigger gap here, so sometimes there was a little bit of warping issues. So if you can see that there, when it's only this
this wide it's not so bad. You can just use the soldering iron to sort of join the two halves, and when it's a bit closer together like that, you can just sort of blend it. You can get it. I'll come back a bit. And where it's got a bigger gap like this, I'd use just a cheap 3D printing pen I found online for $30, and this is ideal for filling in gaps and things. So I'll just put this over here and just fill it in like so, almost using it like a little welder, because it's essentially plastic welding. So I didn't use any glue in it. I just used this technique, that using the soldering iron and a combination of this and the pen, just to fill in any gaps, and stitching in the back of it to hold each piece together. Mainly I just use the pen to lay down filament to fill the gaps, and then I'd use the soldering iron for the sort of final touches and just blending the two sides together. So I'll just leave it at that for now, and then you can see it's quite rough there, but now I'll just use the soldering iron and I'll just blend the two as best I can. Obviously this bit's going to show up a bit easier because it's just a flat surface, whereas on when I'm doing it on the T-Rex head, it was a little bit easier to hide the joins and make sort of if there was bits that did look straight. Like, it's not perfect, but I was able to just leave little blobs of filament with the pen, and then make my own little scales to sort of hide bits and pieces here and there. This is just trying to, it's sort of, soldering iron sometimes can heat up the surrounding plastic a little bit much and everything starts getting soft. So when that happens, you sort of just leave it for a bit in that area. Well, this is only a small bit, but usually I'd just go to a different area and work there, and then come back to it once it had cooled enough to carry on pressing it and working on the joins again. If I go onto the Zen bit here, so you see it's not quite tacked there, so I'll try and join this here. This is just a test piece from, might have been one of the earlier Raptor heads I made. And then I've also got just a standard soldering iron with an unmodified end, which is actually probably slightly rounder than this one, for getting and doing, just putting some of the details back in the tiles and that after. It's amazing how strong using the this plastic printing pen can be. Like, if there was a couple of bits where if I had bigger warping issues, you could actually just bridge the gap areas and just build up slowly. Like, just put a layer down and let that go hard, and then do another layer, and then use a soldering iron, like the same technique we were using before, and fill it in. Just let that cool, and then I'll round that off with the soldering iron once it's cooled a little bit. This bit on the back probably cooled a little bit for now, so I'll just have another go at this. Obviously with using a soldering iron and melting the joins in that, you do lose a little bit of the continuity of the print lines, which sort of can make the joins sometimes noticeable. If you're looking really close, you can't hide them completely unless you sort of round it and blend the joins sort of into the surrounding area a little bit to make it sort of look natural. This bit's still a bit tacky, but yeah, you can just, once it's hard, you can sort of see the idea. You can actually, you can smooth it out and then just keep laying down filament to just fill any bigger gaps, and it works really well. Yeah, so here it is after 700 odd hours of 3D printing each piece, 53 pieces altogether. The final result after it's all been glued together, and it took about 6 or 7 hours to hand paint. And the eyes, as you can see, they were cast epoxy resin in a teaspoon and just a painted iris or pupil, sorry, on the back of the actual casting itself, and then I've just glued them in the 3D printing pen. And as you can see, it's about a metre long, about a metre odd high, and pretty much about 60 centimetres wide, so she's a decent size. I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do with the mounts for it yet. I was going to put it on my wall in the lounge, but seems to be quite a few people interested in seeing it, so I'm thinking I may put it somewhere else now where a few more people can get to have a close look at a sculpted T-Rex head. I have added a little bit of silicone. As you can see, it's still actually just drying. I might play around with that a little bit more, but that was just to give it sort of a little bit of the illusion that it's got a little bit of saliva around its mouth. Other than that, it's just basically just PLA printed on a 3D Ender 3 Pro 3D printer, and yeah, just stitched together with that technique I showed earlier. And yeah, this is SculptrVR Sculpt coming to the real world.